Last week, Battilipes Workshop went on a vacation to Mexico City. Just for a change, here's a brief travelogue of our trip. And if you're interested, there are links to some of my other videos in the description below. So please like and subscribe. Now let's get on with the video. Here's a few highlights of our trip to Mexico City last week. They're mostly photos. We flew directly from Tampa to Mexico City, and it's about a 3.5-hour flight directly southwest across the Gulf. And I didn't really know much about Mexico City before this visit. I had been to the Yucatan and Baja, but never to interior Mexico. Mexico City was built on a site that originally was a large shallow lake named Lake Texcoco. And the Aztecs lived on floating islands where they grew crops. The city was then called Tenochtitlan or something like that. The Spaniards destroyed that city in 1521 and rebuilt it to Spanish standards afterwards. And Lake Texcoco and the surrounding lakes were slowly drained by a series of canals and tunnels between the 1600s up through the mid-1900s. But there are still remnants of Lake Texcoco, where there's a tradition of these small decorated boats where people eat food and have drinks while being poled down the canals. You can see the agriculture still is going on along the banks. We got on a boat with our group of 6, and a smaller boat with the cooks latched right on and took our orders and prepared our food while we were underway. After serving the food, they detached their boats and went on to serve other boats. It seems to be a big deal for locals to do birthdays, weddings, and anniversaries on these boats. We saw a lot of that. There were mariachi bands on boats that would pull up along your boat and for a fee would play music for you. It was really a nice experience. Now, Mexico City is about close to 7,500 feet in altitude. So for us sea level folks, walking could make us a little dizzy at times. The city itself has about 10 million people, but the greater area is about 22 million people. Temperatures were moderate while we were there in late September, mostly in the mid to high 70s, with thunderstorms every day in the late afternoon. We stayed in Casa Jacinta. It was a 7-room hotel in Coyoacan, which is one of the oldest districts in Mexico City, and our room was absolutely amazing. They used treadle sewing machine bases for the table in the bedroom and also to support the counter in the bathroom. The ceiling was arched brickwork, and we had a really big private balcony, but the tables and benches on the balcony were always wet from the rain, so we couldn't really take advantage of it. One of our most memorable meals was the Shava seafood restaurant in Coyoacan. We had a dish kind of like a stacked up ceviche for 2, and it was delicious. It had several kinds of raw fish. It had octopus. It had cooked and uncooked shrimp and avocado all set on a bed of cucumbers. We went on a downtown walking tour one morning. It was early, so we had the guide all to ourselves. We saw so many churches and cathedrals, I didn't even know the names of them. I just couldn't keep track. So you can see here photos of some of the cathedrals, the artwork, and some of the identifying plaques when I could find them. Mural art's a traditional important part of Mexican culture, so you see a lot of that. The older buildings were made mostly of lava rock, with, I think, limestone at the corners of the walls and around the windows and the doors. The area around Mexico City is volcanic, and there is a large volcano that's currently active just southeast of the city. We saw the Olympic Stadium from 1968. There was a lot of symbolism on the logo of the building representing all the American countries. The stadium is right next to the main campus of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and it's huge. Tuition's free, but applicants have to have great grades or score really high on an entrance exam to get in. And it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The guide told us there were about 100,000 students at this campus, and Wikipedia has the total enrollment of all campuses across Mexico at over 300,000. And the library there is amazing with its tiled exterior. Here's a meal from another restaurant in Coyoacan. This was Chilean sea bass. We saw a few older cars. I always like to look for those, and this particular one is a Renault 4TL. I'm guessing from the 1970s, although they were built from 1961 through 1994. We found the Leon Trotsky Museum and home, just a 10-minute walk from our hotel. My wife and I had the museum guide all to ourselves because, again, we were there early. He took us through the entire history of Trotsky, who was a Russian socialist who worked with Lenin and Stalin to overthrow the Tsar and eventually establish the Soviet Union. Then Trotsky had a falling out with Stalin in 1929, and he fled and eventually got asylum in Mexico, where he first lived in Frida Kahlo's house, which is also in Coyoacan, and it's also a museum. But he later lived on the grounds that you see in these pictures. He turned it into a fortress after the first assassination attempt by Stalin's people in 1939. The main bathroom was fitted with iron doors as a safe room, and many of the windows and doors throughout the house were filled in or partially filled in with stone, brick, and steel. There are numerous bullet holes both inside and outside the home. His home eventually became his grave when a second attempt 3 months later was successful. The Frida Kahlo home and museum is not far away, also in Coyoacan. We walked by it, but there was a huge line to get in, so we didn't go in. One of the highlights was a balloon ride where we could see the sun and the moon pyramids from above. It was a small balloon, only the pilot and 4 passengers, but it was great fun. Our previous balloon ride was in Turkey, but it was a much larger balloon that held 20 people. But our Mexican pilot was young and very enthusiastic, and as you can see, there were dozens of balloons up in the air at the same time. It was serene and beautiful. After the flight, we had breakfast at a nearby restaurant that's in a lava tube cave nearby. It was fun, but the coffee was some kind of spice sweet variety. I'll stick with my espresso. Later, we went to the pyramids where we could walk around and see them up close. It was a really interesting time. Not a lot of information on the signs there. And I've seen the Mayan pyramids such as Chichen Itza, but these were much larger. There had been an entire city built around these pyramids, and you can still see the remnants. And at the pyramid, there were some ancient painted murals. Here's one of a jaguar. And interesting mortar between the stones. They set small gravel-sized rocks in the mortar between the large structural stones, which we also noticed in our hotel room. So these were the highlights of our trip, and although it was short, we really had a great time.